Hey crafty friends, this is Chelsea. Welcome to today's video. I'm excited to show you some new products and do some scrapbooking with you. So in case you didn't see it, the new Lake Life collection from Stampin' Up! Just released like a couple of weeks ago, and it is a beautiful outdoor collection. It is called Lake Life, but I think you can use it for all sorts of outdoor photos like we're going to do today. This is the sticker sheet. I wanted to show it to you. I probably am not going to use it today for my photos because my photos are waterfall and mountain photos, not lake photos. But it's a beautiful collection and I thought it would go so good with these. So if you've been watching the creative design team all week, then you'll know this is part of the collab. We're all using photos from our trip together. This was on our way up to Whistler, which is just north of Vancouver. And I have a whole bunch of photos here. I've either printed them with a white border or I have stuck them onto white cardstock to make a border. So I have lots of photos to include on this layout. And if you haven't seen the videos from the other members of the creative design team, I will link that at the end of this video because we all have our own kind of take on how to scrapbook these photos. I'm also going to bring in some wood grain paper. This is the Country Woods collection from Stampin' Up! And I've been using this a ton. It has all kinds of beautiful wood grain patterns in all kinds of different tones. So I'm going to probably choose one of those, maybe two, to include on my layout and just add to this paper. Now, of course, I also want to include some stamps and dies. And I have pulled in this one. I love the holes on this one. It's called Everyday Details and it makes me think of stitching. So I'm tempted to do some stitching on this layout. We'll see what happens. And then I grabbed the outdoor sets that I have. So this is the In the Grove and this one has stamps and dies. And of course it has more dies than stamps. So there's some extra mountains and this like birch tree scene, some little animals. I'm excited to play around with that. And then this one is called Forever Forest Dies. There is a coordinating stamp set. You can see some of the tree outlines there that coordinates with. But I love just these standalone trees. So I might bring in some of those. There's also a mountain range, which would go perfect with this. So we shall see what happens, but that's kind of where I'm starting from. I thought I would use a sketch. So this is the Creative Design Team, the Volume 2 12x12 sketchbook. And I liked how this one has so many photos. We got a good variety between portrait and landscape and even some square photos. So I thought this would be a good design to fit in everything that I want to share. So I know I want to have strips of pattern paper for these pieces, and then I just have to decide what I want in the background. You guys know that my go-to is usually white cardstock. But I thought, what if we start with green this time? So this is Pine from Close to My Heart, and we do have the dark side or the light side. I'm not too sure which one I actually want to use. Both will work great. And then I went ahead and cut some of the wood grain paper and then this plaid paper. Now I did want my plaid to match up. So I had to be very specific about that when I was cutting to make sure that those green, those pine stripes were going to go straight across. And I did cut wrong at first, so I did have to just cut a second piece to make sure that I was going to get that nice linear line because I thought it looked weird if they were offset. So I have a 5x7 here with printed with a white border, and then I have a 4x6 with the waterfall on the other side, and then I could have done two landscape photos just like these sketch shows. So they have one here and one here, but I had more portrait photos that I wanted to use. So I just matted those onto some white and those are going to go in there. And then I have some square photos and I thought it would be fun for these photos to just make them a little bit more playful. These ones are all fairly serious and we had so much fun with our little impromptu photo shoot. So I thought I would like to include these little snapshots of everyone just like smiling and kind of playing around, having a good time. I'm just standing weirdly in the background of this photo, and so I was like, well, I could just layer that right over top and we'll never know that that happened. So I think that's what I'm going to do, is have those kind of coming down this side this one over here. And then when I look at the sketch, there is a little like zip strip, like a 1/2 inch strip that goes along the bottom. I'm not sure if I want to include that or if I just want to center my pieces on the layout. I could basically have them the same distance from the top and bottom instead of having a wider margin at the top. And I think I might do it that way. Sometimes I just really like those symmetrical designs, and I'm thinking that's going to be a winner. I might also overlap these or maybe add another mat. I have some Acorn cardstock here. It matches the brown pretty well in this wood grain, as well as that is the brown in this collection as well. And so I could mat that, and just helps that white pop a little bit, add some definition, because I have a lot of white in this paper, a lot of white in this paper, and that's the biggest reason why I thought maybe a colored background would be the best solution, because if I did my usual like white cardstock background, it would just be so washed out. Now if I'm going to do this brown cardstock on this side, I kind of need to do it on the other side too. I've decided that I want to do something on the cardstock. I think it's going to be too plain if I just leave it as solid cardstock. I want some sort of pattern. So I'm going to take everything off, and I'm going to start off by sanding. So I just put a piece of scrap paper under here to protect my Versamat. You never want to sand on top of any kind of cutting mat or anything that can get scratched, or you could rub off the markings. And I'm using the Tim Holtz sanding grip, but you could use any kind of sanding block, just so that it's kind of an even surface for sanding. I love how the white core shines through and just gives a nice distressed edge to both of my pieces here. I did the other one off camera, and now I want to add some pattern. So I grabbed some leaves. Now this is a little sneak peek. This is a set that is coming out in July from Stampin' Up. It was just the perfect leaves, exactly what I wanted. So I'm going to use these with pine ink, and I'm going to use just first generation. I'm going to use the ink at full strength. Since I'm stamping onto pine cardstock on the dark side, I think it should work out pretty well. I did flip my Versamat over to the more cushioned side since I am using a photopolymer stamp, and it just helps me get a good impression, especially with such a solid image. I'm only using one image for this, and I'm just going to rotate it around, kind of twist it so it's going different angles, have some parts coming off the edge. I always find when you're stamping on a piece of paper trying to create a pattern, or like this, I just want some pattern around the edge. It always looks good to stamp off the edge. It makes it look like the pattern is very natural. It just continues on after the edge of the page, and it doesn't look strange. If you try and keep everything within the edges of your paper, sometimes it ends up looking a little strange. So I went ahead and did both pieces, and it looks a little weird now, but once I get the paper on there, it will kind of make sense. It'll look like I have pieces of pattern paper. There was no point in stamping in the middle because all of that's going to be hidden anyways. I have to tell you guys, as I was putting these pages together, I just could not stop smiling. This trip was so much fun. Everything we did was so much fun, even if it was just sitting and chilling at our Airbnb or traveling all squished into a minivan. We just had such a great time together. And this stop actually was kind of a spur of the moment. As we were on our way driving to Whistler, I was on my phone looking for things to do. I did a fair bit of the planning for this trip, and so I was kind of like, what else can we do on our way up to Whistler? You know, maybe see something cool that we hadn't planned on seeing. So I found this Brandywine Falls on a blog somewhere, and it said that it was a really cool stop. So we ended up pulling in here and then had like a big photo shoot basically. And we just had a great time and saw some really beautiful scenery, a beautiful waterfall, and definitely lots of laughs. This photo in particular is funny because that's Janice under there. That looks like Katie is standing on top of her, but Katie actually edited this photo afterwards. There was nowhere to prop the camera or anyone to take our picture here, so she was able to edit herself in, and it looks like she's standing on top of Janice. We definitely had a lot of laughs on this trip. I'm going to pull in some more stamps. This is the Lake Life Stampin' Thin Cuts. Unfortunately, this one sold out really fast, so it's no longer available in the North America market. But I'm going to use a few of the words. The title is Let's Take the Scenic Route, and I used one of the Everyday Details dies to cut this pattern paper. This is from that Lake Life pack, and it's a very soft glacier kind of waves water pattern. and I was mostly just using it for the color. I probably could have grabbed some just plain Glacier cardstock, but whatever, I went with this. You can see on the left, I already tried this once, and I used Seabrook cardstock with the pine ink, and I just didn't love how that looked. So I grabbed this other paper and then used Intense Black, which is a nice softer black. And I'm a lot happier with that version. It stands out a little bit better. Now, I told you I might bring in stitching, and I decided to go for it. I had this brown color. It's not quite as warm as the Acorn, but it's close. It's probably closer to Toffee, and it's DMC brand in 3863 is the number. But I counted out the middle to find where the middle hole was, and then I'm going in from the top because I want to leave an end so I can tie a bow there. And then I'm just going to go back and forth and back and forth. So not complicated at all. It kind of looks like maybe I'm making it complicated, but I'm literally going down and up and down and up, not skipping any holes. These dies cut really good sized holes, so even though I'm using all 6 strands of the DMC Floss, it's not hard at all to go through there, and this actually went pretty quickly. I did cut some of this out though, just to spare you, and then I'm going to tie a bow. So I'm just making a loop, then going around and pulling that through, and that makes a nice flat bow. And then half the battle with bows is just playing with them, adjusting, pulling, tightening until you get a bow that you're happy with. Now, if you have trouble tying a bow right on there, you could always tape the ends to the back of this title piece, tie a separate bow, and then just use a glue dot to attach it. But this worked out really good. I'm happy with how that looks. I love this distressed texture to the word scenic. Kind of looks like watercolor. Now I want to make a couple areas with a bit of a scene. So I grabbed 3 of these tree dies. There's even more sizes in the set, but I just grabbed 3 of them. These are the Forever Forest dies, and I'm going to cut them in the dark side of pine, the back side of pine, so the lighter shade, and then rosemary. And that will give me some variation in the green shades. Now that I've kind of figured out where those trees are going to go, it's safe to stick down my title. So I grabbed these foam sheets. I really like these solid foam sheets. They have adhesive on both sides. They're from Stampin' Up. And you can use them, like cut them in whatever shape you need, and your piece won't sag. So rather than having to use a bunch of strips of foam tape or something, I can just do one solid piece and it's very sturdy. I think this is great for scrapbooking and for cards when you don't want pieces to sag. I want to add some mountains to my little scene before I stick on the trees, so I'm stamping this beautiful image just in Intense Black onto white cardstock, and then I die cut it with the coordinating die. And isn't that beautiful? I love how this looks. I love that it's a really realistic mountain. There is a mountain die in the Forever Forest set, but it's a little bit more graphic and not as realistic. So I made sure to stick those mountains kind of under my photos. And then I'm going to go ahead and use my glue to just start adhering those trees. I thought about popping up 1 or 2 of them, but then I decided it's just easier to put everything down flat with glue, and then I don't have to worry about trying to cut tiny little pieces of foam tape or anything. I'm glad I varied the colors of the trees so they kind of stand out from each other, and that rosemary actually works really good. Now I don't have rosemary anywhere in my paper, but because the photos have some grays and things in there, that rosemary is quite a gray-green, and it works really well with it. I also stamped this little wolf from the In the Grove set onto Acorn Cardstock, and I stamped it in black, and I just felt like it needed something else there, some kind of little focal point for that scene, and I think that worked pretty good and added a little bit more acorn onto the page. Now I am just layering up my photos on the other page, finding what angle I want them at, and then I'm going to start working on the clusters on this page. Both of those shapes I cut out of that wave pattern paper using that Everyday Details dies. There's a lot of dies in that set. So I'm just placing them there as I work on my clusters until I figure out exactly what I want to do with them. Here I put the adhesive a little too close to the top of my photo, so I had a hard time sticking my mountains under. And I think I want this side to be a little bit shorter. I don't want them to go out quite so far. And I'm also going to layer up some trees. So I kind of have to figure out how I want those all to go, what colors I need, and if I want to cut some different sizes. I like the general idea of what I have going for this cluster. It's just going to need a little bit of tweaking. So I'm going to pull the mountains out of here and trim them up with my scissors to hopefully make it easier to get that under there. just going to cut off part of this bottom too, so I don't have to try and like shove it so far under the photo. And I think that'll be good just to have the mountains a little bit smaller on that side. I went ahead and stamped this circle, the little slice of heaven from that same Lake Life stamp set. And then I did the same thing with the DMC floss around and tied in a bow. I have a couple of trees underneath this before I stick it down. And then I'm going to layer another tree over top of that left-hand side. I just wanted to have a little bit of layering happening. So some trees behind, then the other tree in front. And then I just have to kind of play here and decide how I'm going to layer up these trees. I didn't like how it was looking. It looked kind of like it just all of a sudden fell off. So I went and cut an even smaller little tree there. So I got quite the little forest going on back behind that circle. I did end up using one little sticker from the sticker sheet. This one says Good Times. I added it down here with a couple of trees in that bottom right and a little brown squirrel because I felt like it needed some acorn in there. And that little squirrel is from the In the Grove set. Now this, I was playing around with this last piece of mountain and I thought, wouldn't that look good if I have it on the other side of the trees? So it looks like the mountain continues. And I'm really happy with how that looks. I did print my journaling on the light side of Glacier Cardstock, and then I added a little strip here with the wood grain paper just to add like another layer because I cut them both to look like banners. This die that I'm moving around the page is from the Everyday Details set, and I'm thinking of using it as a template to poke holes and do some stitching on my layout. I can't run my layout through a die cut machine, but I can put some foam underneath, line the die up over top, and then use a piercing tool to poke holes through so that I can still use that design for my stitching holes. And then it makes it a lot easier to get everything evenly spaced. I don't have to eyeball it. And I thought this would be a nice addition to add on to the page. I kind of debated whether I should do it or not, and then I just jumped in and did it. This is a very easy way to add some detail to your page, but it does take some time. And because I'm working through so many layers of paper, it does take quite a bit of pressure. I'm going back and repunching the holes once I've moved the die, just because I wanted to make them bigger so that the stitching process would be a little bit easier. I'm going to start my thread on the back side of the layout, and because I want to keep this as flat as possible, I'm not going to tie a knot. I'm actually going to tape my ends down. You could use washi tape, regular Scotch tape. Basically, you just want to hold it in place, and if I make a knot, it's going to kind of leave a little bump behind there. Now I'm using a regular back stitch, so I started in the second hole and then stitched back into the first hole, and then I come up in the third hole and go back down into the second hole. So essentially you're going up in the next hole, whatever is next in line, and then going back down through the one just behind it. That's called a back stitch. Now, I was kind of thinking about which way I should do my stitches, and I decided to do the whole bottom row first and then come back on the other side and do the top row. This way I'm not working back and forth and wasting a bunch of thread. I thought this way it made the most sense. So it's not hard at all. You're just going up and down, but it does take some time. So these are always things I like to do while I'm like watching a show or listening to a podcast or something, and just enjoy the process. If you don't enjoy stitching, you could definitely leave it off. It didn't need it, but I enjoy stitching, and so I try and fit it into my pages now and then when I have time. I cut out some of the process just to save on time, and now that I've gotten all the way to the end, I'm going to do the same thing, add a piece of tape, and then just trim off the excess thread, and that makes a really nice flat back to it, and it won't be causing any bubbling or anything in my album. I love the texture that this adds, and you know, I couldn't just leave it at one area. I had to add it in 2 more spots. So you can see over here on the right hand page, I added about 4 of those little X's, actually overlapping the photo of Andrea. And then this one over here, I did the whole border. I punched the whole thing and stitched all, and I love how that looks and how it connects those 2 pieces of paper and kind of fills that little gap. That was actually the original reason I decided to use that die as a stitching guide, because I wanted to put something in that little area. Here is a look at the finished pages. I hope you love it. I had so much fun creating it. and is one more story told. I'm excited to put it in my album. If you haven't checked out the Creative Design Team sketchbooks yet, you should go on over to the link down below and check those out. They are such great inspiration for your pages. And then make sure you go over here to the playlist and watch all of the Creative Design Team videos using the same set of photos. Lots of inspiration for scrapbooking your outdoor photos. Thanks so much for joining me, and I'll see you next time. Bye.